mentioned, and thank you for the kind introduction. We are Once Future Office. We are based in Brooklyn. This is a portrait of our studio recently commissioned by the contemporary artist Milana Lee. I'm Nikki. I have the brightest shirt. Joined by Danjai, my partner at the studio, and Nick and Drianne, our beloved and longtime designers. Drianne has the best pants, I would argue. We used to meet in real life. Ooh, crunchy. And actually in this photo, we were joined by a MICA alum, Stella Kim. And now our meetings actually look a bit more like this. So, you know, we feel you all. Online learning probably isn't all that you would hope for in your college education, but we're all making it work, and it's varied, it's colorful, and you know, we're excited to have the opportunity to present to you today without having to travel. Just to kind of, as we were preparing for this talk, we were thinking a lot about, you know, how Isaac had told us a little bit about like what the theme of the lectures have been this year, and we were thinking a lot about like how did we get here, what where did we come from, and one thing we wanted to share that is integral to our studio is how much relationships matter to us. The reason we're even talking to you today, this is a big throwback. I won't give you the year just to preserve Isaac and my my pride a bit, but we were in grad school together long, long ago in a galaxy far away in Providence, Rhode Island. And you know, prior to that, Danjai and I had actually gone to school together, gotten architecture degrees on the West Coast, and reconnected at RISD. And it is through maintaining relationships with past colleagues, with friends, that we were able to build a studio practice here in a previous MICA graduation where you were all allowed to congregate in public spaces. Somewhere in the frame is Nick Fogarty. And when he contacted us, he said, "I know Isaac," and we're like, "Cool, you're hired." And similarly, Drianne came to us by way of a former colleague who was teaching at UConn. And we've now become a really close-knit studio. But it extends more to beyond even, you know, who we are internally. Who we work with is largely informed by our backgrounds and the people that we've met and the relationships we continue to build. We work with a lot of architects, city agencies, such as, you know, the New York City Department of Health, universities and schools like yours, MIT, RISD, Boston College. We work with museums. We'll show you some museum work later in this presentation, but we also work with smaller galleries, nonprofits like the New York Immigration Coalition, Community Votes. We also do work with real estate developers, but also web developers. The vendors that we work with in order to make the work happen are longstanding relationships that we cultivate. And we consider all of these things collaborations. We have signage fabricators who are helping us figure out how you actually build and mount signs. And we have printers who are helping us produce the books that we've designed or the stationery that's being rolled out for a particular identity. And then there are all of the people who have been a part of our studio in the past, some of whom actually came from MICA that, you know, we owe credit to, and we're just grateful for all of these collaborations. We're going to talk to you a bit today about how we approach our work. And for this next section, I'm going to hand it over to Nick.
Thanks, Nikki. So for this first project, we worked with a client called Prospect. They're a young architecture and development studio. And the exciting part of this project was finding their story, like kind of as a young architecture studio just starting out. We were kind of figuring out their story at the same time they were. Um, they're a studio based in New York and Austin. Um, so part of developing their voice was looking at textures and colors, found on these two coasts, or these two cities. Um, and they're a studio that is inspired by lots of different that finds inspiration in lots of different fields. So that's like fashion and technology, um, and fine art. So their identity system is kind of based on this color palette of these two cities, and these kind of like overarching mission statements that speak to their creativity, um, and the selection of imagery that they feel like really speaks to their practice and their approach to architecture. A big part of this system was developing a system of print pieces for their portfolio and pitch documents. Um, what you just saw was like calling cards um, that functioned as the cover for these booklets, and they were able to, from this system, they were able to pick and choose what parts of their story they wanted to share with a particular client. Um, and so as a whole, the system captures the kind of thoughtfulness and wide breadth of inspiration and kind of like the optimistic energy that's fostered in all of their projects and their relationships with their clients. The next project we'll share is a book by an architect who 15 years ago found himself wanting to tell stories through his medium of architecture. And this was during the recession, where he just found himself like, what projects should I be working on to kind of like fill all of this empty free time I have? So he partnered with his sister, who's a researcher on fairy tales, to tell stories that we're all kind of familiar with through an architectural lens. So Andy and Kate Bernheimer collected or solicited um, all kinds of imagery from their colleagues in architecture. Um, so this is the book cover, and I should say that though we're showing the cover first, we typically design it last. Um, so the all of the content and research and everything that we've learned along the way is informed at the end through the cover. And these fairy tales have a kind of there's like they're whimsical, but in a lot of ways they're also quite dark. Um, so here's a list of the 20 architects that contributed over the last 12 years, that were invited to visualize a well-known fairy tale. So the book begins with a synopsis of the fairy tale, followed by the imagery and the imagery from the architects that were invited to submit. And then the book also features a Q&A with that architect. I mentioned that many of the fairy tales we know, like this is Goodnight Moon, for example. They're kind of like light and humorous, but the history of the fairy tales tends to have a kind of dark angle. Like this is one that ends with a girl, I think, freezing to death. What else can we say?
think what we're trying to show is also like the cross section of all the imagery that was produced in the last 12 years that initially lived on a blog, and some content is new for the book. We are also a little sad because this book was supposed to launch with an exhibition actually this month at the Center for Architecture, but the exhibition that that we were in the process of designing is postponed to next year.
But if you're looking for a good pandemic read, this book is now available to you. Buy it from a local independent bookstore and not from Amazon.
So in addition to telling stories, you know, we really pride ourselves on building collaborative partnerships. Many of our projects are not just with one's future, but with a variety of people, and you'll see that in some of the projects that we'll show after this too. But this particular project is National Parks Now, and it was a campaign that the Van Allen Institute and the National Park Service put together to partner designers with national parks around the country that were less known, and they asked us to sort of reimagine the visitor experience. And our team included architects, a landscape architect, digital artist, and an ecologist. I think Manuel, who presented not too long ago, also was a design team that was partnered with the national park. So we have a lot of friends and colleagues who were invited. I think there were 6 teams total. And we were partnered with Weir Farm National Park, which began as a farm that a rich American Impressionist artist, it was sort of his playground. He invited his friends on the weekend to paint and entertain and basically have fun around this this landscape in Connecticut. And our team was asked to look at how can we bring visitors year round. And so our campaign, Weir Farm Year Round, became a bunch of operational and design strategies to help the farm sort of solicit visitors during the summer, the fall, the winter, and the spring. Through our work with the ecologist on the team, she and our digital artists sort of helped come up with eco art workshops. So we reimagined their site, thinking about different strategies that can happen there, all the way to, I don't know if you are a national park fan, then you know that there's a stamp book, a passport that you can go around the country and get stamps, stamp at each park. And so we reimagined the Weir Farm passport for them, and sort of bringing in thinking about how you can color, and you're actually not allowed to collect plants, just so you know. This was sort of an idea, but it is against the law to collect plants at national parks. So, but we helped them reimagine their passport, thinking about all the flora and fauna that happens there. So our ecologist was also, you know, thinking of different BioBlitz strategies. Our landscape architect was like, hey, you guys pay to mow the lawn. Why instead of mowing the lawn, why don't we mow different paths along the park in different ways so people can experience the park differently. So there were then different mowing guides, different waypoints that our architects built, these sticks that were viewing poles that if you do visit Weir Farm, there's a whole collection of artwork that was created there. And so you can visit each of those sites where these impressionist works were created. And it also is now a visiting artist program too, where different artists move the poles around the site and create new artwork that relates to that. And it was pretty successful. We were invited to bring that program to Fire Island too, after this was launched. And we also had an educational component to the project. There were different schools that, you know, bused to come to the site to visit. And so we also built a campaign around different smaller visitors to ask them to look closer and to see what the farm had to offer.
In our practice, we also engage and connect communities. We were thinking about, what it's like to be back in school again, and we thought it'd be fun to share this project, which is a welcome kit that we did for Columbia's GSAP, the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning, and Preservation. What we wanted to do in sending out a welcome kit in addition to their students' acceptance letter is to give them a sense of pride, a flash of excitement about coming to New York, about being accepted into one of the most prestigious graduate architecture and planning schools there is. And so included in the kit, it's got some fun sticker tape, a bookmark, a Metro card as your gateway into the city, and a letter from the dean that welcomes them personally into the school. This next project is a campaign that actually just concluded, that it was a social media campaign in conjunction with Community Votes, which is a longtime partner. They're a nonprofit voter engagement organization. And for this year, they wanted to really focus on youth voter engagement. So we worked with a team of 11 organizations around New York City and the youth groups that they serve to determine, what do young people care about? Why aren't they voting historically? Because New York has some of the lowest voter turnout of any state in the country. We wanted to sort of target a campaign toward the issues that young people care about, to grab their attention, offer them shareable imagery that they would feel proud to repost, and really tie the act of voting to what's meaningful to an individual. So this has been out there in the world, and like everyone else, we have our fingers crossed for the results. Alongside this was some thinking around how do you actually deliver the logistics, and a tutorial for how you vote early, or how you would vote during a pandemic. Whether that's by mail or in person early. In New York, it's the first time that we've been allowed to vote early. So there's a lot of new information that needed to be conveyed. Given our architecture background, it was sort of a natural transition for us to think systematically and design at all scales. We want to show you a series of work that speaks to that. The first of which is an exhibition that first occurred at the Center for Architecture and then has since traveled to Sydney and most recently Shenzhen. This is a exhibition that is started from an acknowledgement that over 50% of New Yorkers are rent burdened. We'll see if that continues to be the case post-pandemic. But the show was all about examining innovative ways to reduce the cost of housing. So we teamed up with Andy Bernheimer and his firm to come up with the visuals for this show. The different strategies that are being employed to reduce the cost of housing might be using the land in different ways, using technology, reimagining how public housing works, building more simply, using modularity, etc. Throughout the walls, there are these sort of infographic moments that help break up the different case studies about affordable housing, and one of which was a wall that compares what someone can afford based on their profession, or a history of New York City public housing. And the visuals for the show are sort of based on this idea of a graphic equalizer, the idea that you can shift these different levers to adjust the cost of housing. And here's some of the promotional material for the show. The next exhibition is Art in the Open, which was at the Museum of the City of New York. This was a collaboration with Tao and McCown Architects and Project Projects, now Workshops. This show is a retrospective of 50 years of public art in New York City, thinking about all of the work that transformed public spaces and kind of challenged the expectation that art needed to be presented inside of a museum or gallery. So the exhibition itself includes photographs, sculptures, video footage, models and sketches from artists like Saul LeWitt, Chris Do and Jean-Claude and Kara Walker. In this sort of intro narrative timeline, we use the language of wild postings to take people through the timeline of public art in New York City, including major milestones that happened in policy and major artworks that sprung up along the way.
It's also, we had to use imagery because a lot of this doesn't exist anymore. You know, a lot of the public art started by, you know, unlawfully putting up artwork around the city. And so a lot of the remnants that are available are just photographs from through time.
And then there are moments to showcase, you know, artifacts of a performance or something that was temporary. This is a series of performances, events that culminated in an exhibition. Marching On explores the history and context of marching and organized gatherings. So just to give you some history, since the early 1900s, marching bands and the act of marching were powerful forms of cultural expression and political protest for African Americans. We worked with two researchers at Columbia GSAP and the Marching Cobras, which is a drum and dance group in Harlem. And they came up with a performance and costumes to go with it that kind of draw from the theme of camouflage as it relates to questions of public visibility and access. So those performances happened in the fall, and then in the spring, it was followed with an exhibition that showed the historical context and a reproduction of the performance. We had the opportunity to play with the punctures at storefronts, facade. And then for this next project, this is one that's still on the boards and very much in the works right now, but this is a ambitious campus redevelopment project for the Albright Knox Art Gallery in Buffalo. We're going to be, well, we're in the process of rolling out a full rebrand and a comprehensive signage and wayfinding system for this contemporary art museum. Their campus is really great. It's 50,000 square feet. Yeah. There's a building in the center that was built in 1905. And then in the 1960s, there was an addition created by SOM that's this kind of modernist black box. And what's now being proposed by the architects OMA is a new building. And the challenge is, how do you instruct and guide visitors across this campus and offer them a community-focused and autonomous experience across these three architecturally iconic buildings? Our project team is huge. This is an example of a recent meeting, but really collaborative. We've been working with stakeholders within the museum, with board members, with architects, consultants, landscape architects, to determine what is the best way to help someone navigate the museum from the exterior edge inward. Working with Workshops, our good friends and collaborators, we defined a new identity system for the museum that both renames it and situates it in its context within Buffalo. And it utilizes a custom typeface from Christian Schwartz and an iconic context-specific word mark with this variable punctuation. And the identity and signage system are going to support the museum in their objective to be more community focused and more welcoming. The material palette very much has inspired our thinking around signage and wayfinding. And we're looking at ways of extending signage in the, from the more intimate spaces to the more social gathering spaces, and something that projects outward their mission, because they have this incredible collection of artwork that would rival the Guggenheim or the Whitney, and a lot of people don't know about it. So the signage system in the more intimate spaces will rely on more opaque matte materials, and within the social spaces, it brings in some reflective metals, which extend outward. This is an example of the palette we're working with. And we're carrying this out across all of the museum's wayfinding, whether it's gallery ideas and directionals. And this is an incredible opportunity to explore how a user traverses this space, what information they need at any particular point in their journey, and how best to communicate that without confusing. We've had some fun imagining how the new identity can be translated into 3 dimensions, whether it's something that's both sculptural and functional as seating, but also serves as wayfinding. So yeah, that's very much still in progress, but we'll be excited for you to go visit it when it reopens in 2022. These lectures are always an opportunity to give you unsolicited advice. So if we were to do so, our parting thoughts would be, in your work, find the story. That's the beauty of graphic design, that you get to take in all of this information that, that is new to you for every project. Find that story and figure out how to communicate it. Work collaboratively, build your relationships, because you never know who you'll have a chance to work with again, or who they might introduce you to in the future. Even if you don't start your own practice, the way that I got all of my first jobs was through people I knew. And so it's so important to maintain those relationships. And then use design to engage and connect people. Design is a great tool for bringing people together, whether it's around a cause or around an idea. Yeah. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think the work collaboratively, sorry, I can't speak today, but also speaks to, like, you know, to the fact that we don't need to or know how to do everything. So if you know, collaborate with photographers, illustrators, architects, you know, fabricators to help you think through and problem solve. Like there are so many smart people out there that can help problem solve and work with you to make a project even better.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much. That was really incredible, and I really appreciate your unsolicited advice.
We have more for you, Isaac.
I feel like the unsolicited advice is the best part of these presentations. We do have some time for questions, so I wonder from the audience, if you're just feeling brave, you can go ahead and unmute and ask a question.
We encourage you also to ask Nick questions as a former MICA alum.
Or Drianne. Drianne is also part of the studio who's waving.
This is a very, very specific question about your New York voter registration things. Do you know what font the calligraphy font is?
Help me out, Drian. Joe something or other.
Yeah, that one's called Joe 182.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's the brush script. Is that the one you're?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Called Joe 182. Yeah, it's really lovely and captures like the spirit of like people handwriting in their voices, and that's the reason why we chose that one.
Isaac, do you have any questions for us?
Yes. The first one is sort of a nuts and bolts question. There are a lot of students that we have that are interested in accessibility and how that plays out both in physical and also virtual projects. I'm specifically curious with the museum in Buffalo, with so many of the finishes being like reflective or sort of on white, how are you addressing accessibility needs in that program?
That's a great question. It is something that is very much part of our process when it comes to signage and wayfinding in environments. In particular to the reflective material, it is used rather minimally. And we are, without getting into too many details, we are using it selectively. Anything that is accessible or ADA compliant will have all the things that it is compliant in terms of like 50% contrast or tactility, visibility, different heights. So we are, that's sort of the beauty of design, is like, where do we have to follow the rules versus where is there leverage to be creative? And so we're constantly balancing that.
And the museum is really interested in becoming accessible and compliant there. Given the history of their buildings and how old these spaces are, they're very inaccessible. So they actually have an accessibility coordinator on staff who we've been in dialogue with, and is really great as a sounding board for our ideas, and making sure that, if you follow the letter of accessibility, things can become pretty static and dry. So we're constantly in dialogue with them, and it's been a really nice collaboration.
Yeah. And with a project that complex, we also work with ADA compliant experts who sort of come in and review everything too. So it's being reviewed at every single level as far as ADA compliance.
Thank you.
Yeah. It looks like somebody typed in a question.
Yeah. What would you say, this question's from Victoria. What would you say your experience in studies at MICA prepared you the most for post-graduation and for the design world, especially working in a design studio that is cross-disciplinary? That is a great question. Yeah, I think that this question maybe gets at like the crux of what our presentation was about. Kind of, I think one of the most memorable parts of MICA was the like building the community and building your like small network of friends and collaborators. Yeah, I remember my senior year, when we got to have our own studio spaces, or our own desks within like an open studio plan. I think that MICA helped. MICA and then also the students themselves too fostered an environment where there was never any like shame in asking for help and or getting someone else's opinion on something. And yeah, and just having those like very important conversations that you need to have when you're kind of designing, when it's just like you and your MacBook Pro, to kind of get a second look at something and ask someone, does this make sense? Or is there another way that I can look at this? So I think that like having those like conversations with peers feels like really, really important, and also feels like something, yeah, specific to MICA.
Thank you.
Another question, how might you suggest going about fostering community and collaborative spaces now during COVID and possibly in a post-COVID world where many things are going to be online? This could be a question for anybody, for any of us.
I mean, I think even though our conversations and our exchange of information might not be in person, but being online shouldn't stop you from that. Like every day we're constantly in dialogue together as a design team, together with our clients, with our collaborators. So, you know, even though it might just take that extra effort for you to build that online community or exchange with your fellow classmates and friends or collaborators, but you know, it shouldn't stop you from having that dialogue. I don't know if that answers the question, but you know, those conversations and those interactions can still happen.
Maybe it's that you have an open Zoom room where people can come in and out who want to, you know, throw something on the wall and just see like, hey, what do you think of this?
Yeah.
John Jai and I, over the years, often would just be in a chat together, but not actually talking. It's almost as if you're in a room together. And so occasionally, you know, if you want to throw an idea around, someone is just there.
Yeah.
It's hard, you know, it's not the way it was supposed to be. I'm not someone who's meant to work from home, and I very much miss the camaraderie of being in spaces with other people. But we're finding our hacks for how to get around that.
I know that MICA students are really brilliant and creative and scrappy too. So I feel like you will find what works for you if you push yourself to try everything.
Isaac, do you have another question for us?
Sure. Looking back to when you were starting, what is some advice that you wish that you had gotten then?
I'll take this one. Try everything. Try everything as an experiment. I'm a perfectionist at heart. I'll be the first to admit it. And so keeping a spirit of experimentation, of allowing yourself to make mistakes and for it to not always have to be just so, I think would have really helped me through some of my foundational years in graphic design. Coming from an architecture background, I wanted everything to align, to have a purpose, to have a reason. And sometimes you just need to make shit and it needs to just be pretty. And you can like stretch your formal skills And, you know, there's different ways to evolve your creativity. Anyone else want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think that when I heard also the theme of these lectures about finding your voice, something came to mind where I feel like it after school, I feel like, or after college, I feel like I think struggled the way that most people do in like finding their voice and kind of like really holding like finding the ways to design and use my voice when working like for an employer, like the thing that you're really not used to in school. But yeah, so I feel like in my career at Once Future, there was kind of this moment where I felt like my voice doesn't match everyone else's, and that made me feel bad and weird. But then, you know, I don't know, after just like having those conversations with Nikki and Danjai and Dran, the reason that I was here was to because my voice was different, and that was my purpose and value at the studio.
Yeah, we love your voice.
Yeah, totally.
Very much so.
Yeah, and I think that like finding your voice is not something that will happen right, you know, once you graduate. It can take time, and don't worry and don't stress about it. It's something that through practice and involvement with people that, you know, you'll work and craft your own voice, and kind of like dating, like you slowly learn like what you like, what you don't like, you know, what you say, what you don't want to say. So, you know, it's something that will happen as you keep working, and it's a skill. So yeah. And I wanted to go back to Nikki's point about like just like making stuff. Something we do in our office a lot, which I really admire, is charretting, or what we call like charretting. And this is just like when we will ask ourselves a question, maybe there's something in the process that we want to explore, and we'll just kind of like go into our own corners, work on stuff, bring it back, and present to each other. And I think that that is a way to break yourself if you are feeling like, you know, you want to do the perfect thing. It's a way to just be like, okay, time to get loose and explore, and treating it like this isolated moment where you're just dedicating yourself to, you know, like casting a wide net. And that's really something, yeah, maybe a good thing to take on and think about as you're going forward.
Another thing that we started to do, just started, but has been really fun, is our craft sessions, or we call it creative sessions. So on Fridays, you know, we're trying to dedicate some time because of COVID, and to just do whatever we want to do, but share our screens and talk, have music on for at least 2 hours on a Friday to just do something creative. I think Drianne was making origami. I was trying to start a knitting project. Nick was playing with, what is it called?
It's called
modeling dough.
it's a toy for 5-year-olds. Yeah, that
Yeah.
5-year-olds can't eat the clay and it doesn't kill them. But yeah, it's a great toy. I'm sponsored by Model Magic.
Yeah, so I mean, that's just another way to connect to your colleagues and you know, during this time, but and to break up your, at least for us, a break up our work week.
There were only so many happy hours we could have. Like you can't drink that much more during this time than you already are.
Any last questions from the group? Okay, I guess not. Well, Nikki, Dangjai, Drian, Nick, thank you so much for sharing your work and sort of, I guess, the inner workings of the studio. I think that was really helpful to hear. Thank you for sharing your time with us. To our audience, I did want to let you know that we have some more talks coming up next week. On Tuesday, we have Virginia Chow. On Wednesday, we have Hisancio and Susie Chan. And then on Thursday, we have Pablo Medina. So do please look out for those announcements over social media. And also, the recording of this talk will be up today or tomorrow on MICA Graphic Design's Vimeo. So if you'd like to rewatch or share it with a friend, it'll be available. So thanks so much, everyone. Maybe you want to unmute and say bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having us. Be well.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Micah.
And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to us after.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
I love all these reactions.
I know.